What if the very blood that made you royal was also destroying you from within? Throughout history, Europe's most powerful dynasties practiced something that would horrify us today: deliberate inbreeding to keep their bloodlines pure. The results were devastating princes born into unimaginable wealth, yet cursed with bodies and minds that betrayed them at every turn. At number 10, Prince John of England, 1166–1216. The youngest son of Henry II, Prince John entered this world already marked by the genetic chaos brewing in the Plantagenet bloodline. Born into a family where cousins married cousins for generations, John displayed the telltale signs of inbreeding from childhood. Historical records describe his unusual physical appearance, including a disproportionately large head and erratic behavior that would define his reign. His notorious cruelty and paranoia, documented by chroniclers of his time, may have stemmed from neurological damage caused by centuries of genetic bottlenecking. John's reign became synonymous with failure, losing most of England's French territories and being forced to sign the Magna Carta by rebellious barons. But that's nothing compared to what awaited other royal bloodlines. Coming in at number 9, Prince Ferdinand of Austria, 1793–1875. Taking the 9th spot is Ferdinand I of Austria, a Habsburg prince whose very existence exemplified the dynasty's genetic decline. Born to first cousins, Ferdinand suffered from epilepsy, a speech impediment, and severe learning disabilities that rendered him virtually incapable of ruling. Court documents reveal that his seizures were so frequent and violent that his coronation had to be carefully staged to hide his condition from the public. His marriage to his second cousin Maria Anna of Savoy produced no children, a common fate among heavily inbred royals. Ferdinand's inability to father an heir contributed to the Habsburg succession crisis that would plague the empire for generations, and yet his suffering pales in comparison to princes whose very survival seemed impossible. Stepping into number 8, Prince Alexei Romanov, 1904–1918. The youngest child of Tsar Nicholas II, Prince Alexei was born into the golden cage of Russian royalty, but his Romanov blood carried a hidden curse. As the product of centuries of strategic marriages between related European royal houses, Alexei inherited hemophilia, a bleeding disorder that turned every childhood mishap into a potential death sentence. Historical medical records describe how a simple bruise could cause internal bleeding that lasted for weeks, leaving the young prince bedridden and screaming in agony. His mother Alexandra's desperate attempts to heal him led her to the infamous Rasputin, whose influence over the imperial family contributed to the dynasty's downfall. Alexei's condition was kept secret from the Russian people, but it couldn't
save him from the brutal execution that ended the Romanov line forever.
However, even his tragic fate seems merciful compared to princes who lived longer with their afflictions. At number 7, Prince Alfonso of Spain, 1907–1938. Coming in at 7th place is Prince Alfonso, the eldest son of King Alfonso III of Spain, and Queen Victoria Eugenie, whose marriage united two heavily inbred royal bloodlines. Born with severe hemophilia inherited through his great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, Alfonso's childhood was a constant battle against his own blood. Spanish court records detail how the prince's condition was so severe that he required round-the-clock medical supervision, with physicians documenting bleeding episodes that lasted for months. His younger brothers also suffered from the same condition, creating a devastating pattern that threatened the Spanish succession. Alfonso eventually renounced his rights to the throne and died young, his life cut short by the very blood that made him royal. But that's nothing compared to the psychological torment endured by other inbred princes. Taking the 6th spot, Prince Rudolf of Austria-Hungary, 1858–1889. Prince Rudolf, the only son of Emperor Franz Joseph I and Empress Elizabeth, represents one of history's most tragic examples of Habsburg inbreeding's psychological toll. Born from a lineage where genetic diversity had been systematically eliminated for centuries, Rudolf exhibited signs of severe mental instability from adolescence. Court physicians documented his violent mood swings, paranoid delusions, and increasing disconnection from reality as he aged. His intellectual brilliance, noted by tutors and courtiers, was overshadowed by a darkness that seemed to consume him from within. Rudolph's liberal political views clashed violently with his conservative father, creating a rift that deepened his psychological wounds. In 1889, at just 30 years old, Rudolph died alongside his mistress in what appeared to be a murder-suicide at Meyerling Hunting Lodge, though the exact circumstances remain shrouded in mystery. And yet, his mental anguish was only a preview of the physical horrors that awaited other royal bloodlines. Coming in at number 5, Prince Charles II of Spain, 1661–1700. Stepping into the 5th position is Carlos II of Spain, perhaps the most visible, victim of the Habsburg dynasty's obsession with genetic purity. Born after centuries of uncle-niece and first-cousin marriages, Charles was the product of an inbreeding coefficient so extreme that he was more inbred than the offspring of siblings. Contemporary portraits reveal his grotesquely elongated jaw, a physical deformity so severe he could barely chew food or speak clearly. Court records describe a man who remained intellectually stunted throughout his life, requiring assistance with basic tasks well into adulthood. His autopsy, conducted by the royal physicians, revealed organs so malformed and diseased that doctors marveled he had survived to age 39. Charles's inability to produce an heir, despite 2 marriages, effectively ended the Spanish Habsburg line, triggering the War of Spanish Succession that convulsed Europe for over a decade. However, even Charles's visible suffering cannot compare to princes whose very survival defied medical understanding. At number 4, Prince Leopold of Albany, 1853–1884. Taking the 4th spot is Prince Leopold, the 8th child of Queen Victoria, and Prince Albert, whose life became a cautionary tale about the hidden costs of royal blood. Born with severe hemophilia, Leopold's childhood was marked by constant medical crises that left him isolated from normal princely activities. Medical records from the royal archives detail bleeding episodes so severe that physicians gave up hope for his survival multiple times before his 10th birthday. His intellectual gifts, including his love of literature and art, provided little comfort against the physical prison of his diseased blood. Leopold's marriage to Princess Helena of Waldeck and Pyrmont was controversial, partly due to concerns about passing his condition to future generations, fears that proved justified when his daughter Alice became a carrier. He died at just 30 years old from a brain hemorrhage following a fall, his life cut short by the very bloodline that granted him his royal status. But that's nothing compared to princes whose genetic damage was written across their faces for all to see. Stepping into number 3, Prince John of the United Kingdom, 1905–1919. Coming in at 3rd place is Prince John, the youngest son of King George V, whose story reveals the cruel lottery of royal genetics. Born during the height of British imperial power, John appeared normal at birth, giving his parents false hope that they had escaped the genetic curses plaguing other royal houses. However, by age 4, he began experiencing severe epileptic seizures that grew progressively worse with each passing year. Medical documents from the period describe seizures so violent and frequent that the young prince had to be kept away from public view, effectively erasing him from official royal photographs and events. His learning disabilities, likely caused by repeated seizure activity, left him functioning at the level of a much younger child despite his royal tutoring. The royal family's solution was heartbreaking. They moved John to a secluded farmhouse where he lived in virtual exile until his death at age 13, his existence acknowledged only in private family correspondence. And yet, even John's hidden suffering pales before princes whose genetic damage created living nightmares. At number 2, Prince Darius of Persia, circa 550 BC. Taking the 2nd position is Prince Darius, son of the Persian Emperor Cyrus the Great, whose story illustrates that royal inbreeding's devastating effects span millennia and continents. Ancient Persian records describe how the Achaemenid dynasty's practice of brother-sister marriage created princes whose physical and mental deformities became legendary throughout the ancient world. Darius reportedly suffered from severe spinal deformities that left him unable to walk properly, requiring specially designed furniture and transportation. Contemporary accounts describe his mental capacity as severely limited, with palace scribes noting his inability to understand even basic concepts of governance despite extensive tutoring. The Persian practice of royal divine marriage, meant to preserve the godlike purity of the bloodline, instead created generations of increasingly damaged offspring. Darius's condition was so severe that rival noble families used his disabilities as justification for rebellion, arguing that the gods had clearly withdrawn their favor from the royal house. However, even the ancient world's most damaged prince cannot compare to our final entry. Taking the number 1 spot, Prince Joanna of Castile's unnamed son, circa 1510. Claiming the most devastating position is an unnamed prince born to Joanna of Castile and Philip the Handsome, whose brief existence represents the absolute nadir of royal inbreeding's consequences. Born into the Spanish Habsburg line at its most genetically compromised period, this prince entered the world so severely deformed that court physicians initially refused to believe he could be human. Secret medical records, discovered centuries later in Spanish archives, describe genetic damage so extensive that the infant lacked basic human features, with multiple organ systems failing simultaneously. The child survived only weeks, during which time his existence was kept absolutely secret from the court and the public. His mother Joanna, already struggling with severe mental illness likely caused by her own inbred heritage, reportedly never recovered from witnessing what her royal blood had created. This unnamed prince represents the ultimate consequence of centuries of genetic isolation, a bloodline so corrupted that it could no longer sustain human life. These princes, born into the highest privilege imaginable, became living proof that some prices are simply too high to pay. Their stories remind us that genetic diversity isn't just a scientific concept, but a fundamental requirement for human survival. The very bloodlines that granted them crowns became their cruelest prisons, turning royal palaces into genetic graveyards, where the sins of countless generations played out in flesh and bone.